Well, hello there, how is everyone? I hope you're all well. It's Saturday, it's still Saturday, and this is video 3. I think it's video 3, yeah it is. Video 3 of 3. And I'm out in the sunshine, because we don't get a lot of it here in the UK. And by the way, you're looking absolutely amazing. So look, I want to touch on something, because the Idaho 4 case, right? We have to think to ourselves, yes, Bryan Kohberger could have done this crime, but equally, we have to fully appreciate that at the moment there just isn't enough evidence, in my opinion, to say beyond a reasonable doubt that Bryan Kohberger did this crime. Ergo, we have to consider the fact that someone else did it. Even with Bryan Kohberger, we have to consider a motive. Even though we don't need a motive, there must be a motive. Now, some people will turn around and say that this was just random, absolutely random. But I will say to people, if you believe that this is an absolutely random crime, and it was Bryan Kohberger doing this randomly, then why would someone doing this randomly pick to go in a house that had this volume of cars outside and the potential to walk into a house that just had an abundance of people? So let's back up a little bit and think to ourselves what we know about the Idaho 4 case itself. We know that we've got student victims. We know that there was a situation earlier on in the evening that specifically saw 2 of those victims on camera talking about a conversation that had been had with Adam, and it was pointing towards the possibility of being repercussions. Now, that could be simple to explain and could not necessarily be involved, but it's like everything. When you have a conversation like that happen, and then several hours later you have the people who were literally talking and talking about repercussions, they end up deceased, you have to consider whether there are some things involved in that conversation that could be connected to the crime itself. Which takes me to Hannah Cleere. Now, Hannah Cleere was a student who was apparently bullied by Madison Mogen. And what do we know about the house, 1122 King Road? We know that from a who lives in this house perspective, we have Madison Mogen, we have Xana Knodel, we have Dylan Mortensen, and we have Bethany Funk. Now we have Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen who are left alone. We have Xana Knodel who is deceased as well, and we have Madison Mogen who is deceased. We have 2 other victims who didn't actually live in the house and could have actually just caught these people unawares. So I say this, right? What we have to appreciate with what happened in this crime is that the person entered this house and would have gone upstairs first. We know that. So in theory, you could say that the person who entered this house went into this house to go after Maddie. Why can we say that? Because Kaylee shouldn't have been there. She didn't live there. She'd moved away. There was not really any reason for her to live there. So unless you are believing that the person who entered this house had prior knowledge of who was in there on this random night, then you must consider the fact that this person entered the house to indeed go after Maddie, and that's something that was speculated right at the beginning. So why would the person enter this house with the sole intention of going after Maddie? Again, we have to at least consider that this was retaliation. There was rage, there was anger, and potentially more than one person. Now, we've been conditioned to believe that Bryan Kohberger entered into this house at this specific time and did this crime in this specific way and in this 8 minutes time frame. But if you remove him out of the equation, that entire dynamic changes, and this crime could have took place in a different way, at a different time, over a different time frame, and in a different way. We hear the likes of Dylan Mortensen claiming that she heard somebody saying, "Don't worry, I'm here to help you," which makes sense in a way, because if you are known to the people in this house, for instance, you would be in a situation where you would be able to be caught in the house by someone who lives there, say Xana for instance, and perhaps not immediately freak them out. Now, you may have blood on you, And you could turn around and say, no, don't worry, there's something happened, but I'm here to help you. Get back in your room, sort of thing, and usher them back into the room, and then think, they've caught me, they've seen me, they're going to find out what I've done, and now I need to erase these people. You then attack Xana Canodal, and then you find out that her boyfriend is in the room as well, and this goes into, this is a snowball effect. But the person, their sole intention was to come into this house to go after Madison Mogen. And it was in fact the reason why this snowballed was because Kaylee Gonsalves was the catalyst of what would have potentially been something quite simple turning into an utter clusterfuck. We know that there was enough noise to rouse who was downstairs because Dylan Mortensen claimed that she'd heard noises, she'd heard things and thought they were playing with the dog, and had potentially, again, we don't know this 100%, but that she came out and had to shout up for them to be quiet, shut the fuck up. So I do wonder whether the motive in all this was indeed retaliation for Madison Mogen being involved in potential bullying of Hannah Cleere, and perhaps Hannah Cleare's, what was stated as an accidental overdose from over-the-counter sleeping aids, there was something more to that. How many over-the-counter sleeping pills would you have to take for that to become toxic? Who knows? Who knows? I would imagine quite a lot, hence being able to be bought over-the-counter. Obviously not as potent as prescription medication. But in the absence of a motive, you do have to wonder why the crime took place. And if there is no motive and there is no connection between the victims and the person who is currently being accused of the crime, there's a missing element to it that don't make sense. So then you're just going down the route of this is just random then, and random for me doesn't fit in with this crime. This property, this dynamic, and Brian Kohberger and it being random for me doesn't work, because Brian Kohberger, if it was just about committing this crime and getting his rocks off somehow, he could have done that in Washington closer to home. But I know some people say we don't shit on your own doorstep, but you also don't go from a non-death penalty state into a death penalty state unless you absolutely have to. Again, in my opinion. But I do consider this still. I do consider, and I know we've touched on Hannah Cleere in the past, but I'm touching on it again because a few of you have been reaching out to me recently to talk about Hudson Lindau and Hannah Cleere. Now, I am going to be talking about Hudson Lindau in the upcoming days, not necessarily because it's connected, but just to raise awareness of what happened around that. And also, we're going to be touching on some hazing deaths that happened at WSU as well. Because there seems to be a problem. There seems to be a problem with students dying and colleges covering it up. And it needs to stop. But until it's put out there and people learn about it and they know about it, and you know, they know that these things are happening, and the things won't change. There's no incentive for them to change. Universities want their money. They bring in a lot of revenue through the fraternity and the sorority culture, and they'll do anything to protect it. But let me know what you think. Does this make sense? Does the Hannah Cleere retaliation against Madison Mogen perhaps hold real credence in this case? And if Brian Kohberger is indeed exonerated and Cy Ray can bring evidence to the table that would lead you to believe that he just couldn't do it, then who are you going to look at? Who do you think is going to be the person who you can then point the finger at and say, actually, we need to look at them? And why? Let me know down below. And I'll catch you all tomorrow.